Excuse me, I think we're just starting now. Hi there. This is Mike Kramer. I'm the Calibration Program Manager at PJLA, and welcome to this month's webinar for March. As you can see, the topic is a glimpse at the key differences between 17025 2017 and the 2005 standard. Been a lot of interest in this particular area. It's been in the works for a while that the 17025 was going to be revised. So the purpose of this webinar is just basically to highlight the key differences between 2005 and 2017. I'm not going to dig down too deeply on any specific item because I'm going to basically go through the whole standard and look at all the various sections. Our webinars, if any of y'all attended the first two, we had the one on complaints and the one on impartiality and confidentiality. That's where we look at each section a little bit more in depth, and we'll tend to drill down a little bit and look more specifically at each individual requirement. Again, as always, this webinar is being recorded. Hence, on the PJLA website, you can go to the link for recorded webinars. You can go back and listen to this. If you have a colleague that may have missed it, they can always go back and listen to this as well. Hopefully, have it up shortly after we're concluded with this webinar. Up on that link is every webinar we've done. I believe it goes back to 2012, so it's a lot of information there. So if you just wanted to listen to this one or go back and listen to any of the previous ones, they are available. The duration of this webinar is set for 1 hour. Hope to not exceed that. There'll be time allocated at the end for questions. We try to coordinate that with our headquarters. There should be a spot on your screen for submitting questions. So we'll go over that when we reach the end, and allocate a little bit of time, go over some questions that you may have. So I'm going to go ahead and get into the topic. Like I said, we're going to go through all the requirements. So basically, time for change. The standard hasn't been revised since 2005. Quite some time to go. A lot of things have changed between now and then. And we're going to look at some of the things that sparked the changes. So basically, as you can see there on the screen, market conditions has changed. ISO, the international standards, has been driven for more harmonization. So amongst the various international standards. So in meeting these two progressions, hence the 2005 standard has undergone numerous changes. So just some of the overall changes to the 2017 standard includes risk-based thinking. That's prevalent in the revised standards and has been primarily driven by ISO 9001, which was revised in 2015. One thing is less prescriptive. This gives greater flexibility in the guidelines for processes, procedures, documented information, and organization responsibilities. Actually, you don't see the laboratory has to have a policy and procedure, and the laboratory needs to address bang, bang, bang. Laboratory still needs to, as you'll see in many instances, have to ensure requirements are being met. However, the prescriptive guidelines set forth in the 2005 standard, you're not going to see present in the 2017 standard. Terminology has been updated, so we've added, and you'll see some new definitions that have come up. One of the biggest changes, and I think back to 2005, when I was at the laboratory, I had a lot of paper copies running around and out. This day and age, computers are much more prevalent. Computers link documents, records things like that together. So the standard now recognizes and incorporates the use of computer system. You don't see references to lists and crossing out and things like that that is normally associated with paper copies. The scope's been revised to cover all laboratory activities. So this includes testing labs, calibration labs, and sampling associated with subsequent calibration and testing. And you'll see that will be in a definition under laboratories that will incorporate those three types of organizations. Another thing you don't see so much, actually you don't see it at all, is testing laboratories and calibration laboratories. There's a couple instances where it refers to laboratories that are involved in testing or laboratories that are involved in calibration. But you don't see the clear separation as you did in the 2005 between testing and testing and calibration. And when you see laboratories defined, referenced in the 2017 as testing, calibration, and also sampling associated with subsequent calibration and testing. And we have some additional requirements in regards to the sampling organizations that this standard covers. So again, the structure aligns in the 1700 series of standard. 2005 was very straightforward. You had Section 4 and Section 5. Section 4 was basically quality management system, QMS. These were things that were captured in ISO 9001. Section 5 was the I know many of you are still operating, running off of the 2005 page. That is more technically. That's where we look at the technical competence of the organization. The 2017 has 5 sections. Option A and Option B, we're going to talk about that. The management system options associated with 2017. Risk-based thinking. The word risk appears 30 times in the document compared to only 4 appearances in 2005. So we're going to have a whole section, the standard, just in regards to risk-based thinking and requirements associated with that. So there is the outline or the structure of ISO 17025 2017. You see it's much more than just section 4 and 5. We have, excuse me, various sections associated with the standard. Okay, we have 9 new definitions in 2017. We have impartiality. We have complaints. And these next 3, interlaboratory comparison, intralaboratory comparisons, and proficiency testing. These are all, those of you that are currently accredited with PJLA PL1, our policy of proficiency testing, has 17025 has incorporated these into the 2017 standard. Laboratory. So as I specified, a laboratory is testing, calibration, or sampling associated with subsequent testing or calibration. The term decision rule. What is a decision rule? Something that's always been required, but now it has to be defined in 2 different places. Basically, in contract review and reporting. So it's always been required that measurement uncertainty has to be taken into account. The decision rule is the rule that describes how measurement uncertainty is accounted for when stating conformity with a specified requirement. We have definitions for verification and validation, and these are separated out and organized very nicely in the 2017 standard. So option A and option B, just wanted to go ahead and hit on that first. Leave the screen up there, you folks can look at that. So in a nutshell, option A is, and if you look at the standard, you'll see section 8 refers to option A. Option A would be for an organization that has not written their quality management system to comply with 9001, or your organization is not registered with 9001 by a recognized register. Hence, if you're not registered and recognized by 9001, these will be assessed by PJLA. I'm speaking on behalf of PJLA. Option B, on the other hand, is for those organizations that have met the requirements of 9001, and with PJLA, in order to be considered option B, we're going to have to see the current registration from that recognized register. So as far as the extent of being assessed to Section 8, if you're an option B, currently, and you'll see here later on in the presentation, we're still going to assess them. But as to the depth of the assessment, is going to be up to the accrediting body. Speaking on behalf of myself and some feedback I've given PJLA, I think we still need to look at them just to assure, especially if you're say you're a calibration lab within a manufacturer, or you're a testing lab within a larger organization, just to assure that laboratory activities are incorporated in the 9001 registration. So option B may or may not apply to your organization. So as I specified, we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at each various section, and I'm going to highlight the differences here. So actually, impartiality and confidentiality, actually those of you all that were on board last month, is where we drilled in a little bit deeper in here and went over each specific requirement. But Section 4.1 is impartiality. It wasn't something that was ignored in 2005. It was addressed in various sections. Over in 2017, we have a whole section dealing with impartiality. So some of the highlights to the requirements basically requires management commitment, laboratory management commitment to impartiality. First time we see that risk word. In regards to impartiality, you have to identify risk, and that needs to be on an ongoing basis. If there is a risk to impartiality, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a non-conformance. Lab should be able to demonstrate how it eliminates the risk or mitigate risk. In other words, if it's at an unacceptable level, if there's some sort of action that can be taken to minimize it to a acceptable level. Okay, 4.2, confidentiality. Again, just like impartiality, it wasn't something that was ignored in 2005. Various sections that's highlighted up there on the top where confidentiality was addressed. However, 2017, we have a section 4.2 that is devoted to confidentiality, and there's a lot more detail here. As you were with us last month, we went through these in detail, but some of the highlights of some of the details in 4.2 is basically the laboratory is responsible for confidentiality through legally enforceable commitments, i.e. the laws of contracts. Could be written, could be verbal. The standard specifies when the laboratory is required by law or authorized by contractual arrangements to release confidential information. Specifies information about the customer obtained from other sources other than the customer, such as a complaint or a regulatory. Also, requirements in regards to individuals, such as subcontractors, consultants, whatever it may be, acting on behalf of the laboratory, and needing to keep that information confidential. 5.0 as a short section covers a lot though. Structural requirements. Still got to be a legal entity. You have to identify laboratory management that has overall responsibility for the laboratory. So it gives a responsibility to the level needed. One thing you don't see in the 2017 is the term quality and technical manager. The functions are there. The title of putting it on someone as a quality manager or technical manager, i.e. less prescriptive, that's not there. Laboratory is still required to define the range of laboratory activities, used to be referred to as a scope of laboratories activities. Still addresses basically if you're doing work both at a fixed facility or on site or a temporary or mobile facility, the requirements of the standard has to be met. Still have to define the organizational structure. And again, the term quality manager, the functions are there. However, does not define titles, and does not have to be an individual. It could be a team of individuals, but you have to ensure you'll see some of these some of these functions that are specified in the standard would need to be met. However, does not have to be pinned on a quality manager. In 2005, it was required. You'll see here later on in the presentation, you had to define quality and technical manager in the quality manual. Well, believe it or not, there's not even a requirement to have a quality manual. Don't want to put the cart before the horse here, but if you have a quality manual and you utilize it, it can still be used to comply with the various requirements specified in 2017. So a couple other things that should be no stranger. Effective communication regarding the effectiveness of the management system needs to take place, meeting customer and other requirements. And the integrity of the management system needs to be maintained when changes are planned and implemented. So there's nothing new there that was addressed in 2005. So section 6 is resource requirements, and 6.1 is sort of like section 5.1 is in the 2015, sort of as an introduction to the rest of the section. So first thing, we're starting to look at some technical things here. You have to have the folks, the personnel to perform the test or calibration. So requirements specify, has to be impartial and be competent. One thing I want to specify here is when it's talking about personnel, it's all those individuals that are involved in laboratory activities. That could be, of course, the folks that are actually doing the testing, calibration, sampling. Could also be the internal auditor. Will be crosswalked over to these requirements over here. The redundancy in 2017 is reduced as opposed to 2005. These requirements for personnel, these are all personnel that are required in all laboratory activities. Shall document the competence requirements. I just said document there. So that is a requirement to have those documented. Competence to perform laboratory activities. Highlighted the word there, communicate, on this next bulleted item. Management of the laboratory shall communicate to the personnel their duties, responsibilities, and authorities. One thing that's not required in 2017 is the requirement to have formal job descriptions. So it's not a requirement anymore. However, if you have a job description, you're utilizing it, that can be used as a vehicle to comply with the requirement that management has to communicate to personnel their duties, responsibilities, and authorities. It's not required to have a job description anymore. However, the job description can still be used to comply with these other elements of 17025-2017. So here we have a section, retain record. So of course, a record is something that shows you what's been done. So these are records that need to be maintained: competence, selection, training, supervision, authorization, and a new one up here is monitoring. So monitoring of the competence of personnel. So you can have someone who's been grandfathered in, been there 20 years, still have to be able to monitor the competence of that personnel. Again, 2017 requirements. These are all captured in the 2005 authorized personnel to perform specific laboratory activities, including development, modification, verification, and validation of methods, analyzing of results, including statement of conformity, opinions, interpretations, report reviews, and authorization of results. So, not anything new there. Alrighty, facilities and environment. So basically, everything is that was intact in 2005 is still intact. Your facility and environmental conditions shall be suitable. Have to document any specific requirements such as temperature or humidity or any specific environmental requirements that may affect your testing or calibration. In addition is measures to control facilities shall be implemented, monitored, and highlighted periodically reviewed. So that's an addition. Activities at sites outside its permanent facility, it shall ensure that the requirements related to facilities and environment conditions are met. So this is that last bulleted point is going to, particularly if you're doing calibrations or testing on site at the customer's location. This basically specifies here if it's out of those documented criteria. I know often your customer's facility may not be controlled nowhere near as close as your fixed facility. That has to be communicated to the customer up front. And I wanted to bring it to the forefront here because it's going to come up again in deviation and also reporting the results. Okay, 6.4 is equipment. Still have to have access to equipment needed. If for whatever reason used out of your permanent control, you have to ensure that the requirements of the standard is met. Still has to have procedures for handling, storage, transporting, maintenance of equipment. Slight change here. And at the bottom, an italicized documentation there. You see what was stated in 2005. In 2017, it states the laboratory shall verify that equipment conforms to specific requirements before being placed or returned into service. 2005 stated calibrated. But 2017, we dig a little bit deeper. It says you have to verify, and then it goes into specific examples of when you need a calibration as opposed to a verification. So, of course, is measurement traceability, or if it's directly affects accuracy or uncertainty, then of course you need to have it calibrated. As far as the type of calibration, depends whether or not traceability is needed, and the accuracy requirements. And if it doesn't, if you do have a calibrations with your equipment as specified in 2005, you have to establish calibration programs. Slight change here. Always specified in 2005, and it was that sort of disclaimer whenever practical. So unless it was not practical, as an internal auditor or an assessor, you're looking for the calibration status to be on that equipment, i.e. labeled. 2017 basically states it has to be readily identifiable. Hence, you go up to a equipment, a balance, a pipette, a thermometer that needs a calibration. It's not required that that label be on there. However, it's something that needs to be readily available. So as an assessor, if I'm looking for the calibration status of a particular equipment that I'm witnessing in action, is something that I want to see rather quickly. And if you're still labeling them, i.e. by a physical label, then that of course will be readily available. However, it's not a requirement anymore. Specific requirements still in place about removing equipment and taking it out of service. Same requirements about intermediate checks. Reference materials are addressed in 6.4. Unintended adjustment, the only basically change there, if it used to say safeguarded, now it specifies unintended adjustments. And equipment records. Those records, I believe, are verbatim from 2005, but you are still required to maintain records of your equipment. (6.5). This is a section all by itself in the 2017. It was no stranger to 2005. Is measurement traceability. So basically, in a nutshell, this section's been sections in tag, however, been slimmed down a lot. However, there is a annex added, which is informative. So Annex A in 17025/2017 is in regards to metrological traceability. Those folks that are accredited with PJLA, this correlates precisely with what we have in PL2, which is PJLA's policy on measurement traceability. So as specified in PL2, and now in the annex of 17025 is the recognition of accredited sources. Goes over the 6 elements of traceability. You can still produce traceable results and not be accredited. However, there are certain criteria that would need to be provided in order to support that traceability. Hence, in a nutshell, there's nothing changed here. There's just a lot more information under traceability, and it has its own section in the 2017 standard. Okay, moving on to 6.6. That's that externally provided products and services. So this is a change. In 2005, we have a section on purchasing, and we also saw that word subcontracting coming up in 2005. Both those activities are considered in 2017 as externally provided products and services, which incorporated 4.5 and 4.6 from the 2005. So basically, your external testing and calibration services, i.e. send out items to be calibrated. These are critical supplies and services. They would come under this section. Okay, 7.1, review of request tenders and contracts. Again, the requirements are intact from 2005. You do still have to have a procedure here. What's specified here is external providers. So again, when you see external providers, in this case, it's referred to as it's addressing subcontractors. It is a requirement that the laboratory advises the customer and gains customer approval. 2005 sort of had that disclaimer where it state when appropriate. That when appropriate does not appear. It's a requirement. You have to inform your customer. Other things is, of course, when the method is requested by the customer considered to be inappropriate or out of date. We have that decision rule here. So I'm saying it's told you up front that when we went over the definition, it's addressed again here during contract review. So when your customer, basically, if he requests a statement of conformity to the specification, the decision rule shall be clearly defined. So this needs to be up front in the contract review. You need to inform your customers if your customer is requiring a pass, fail, intolerance, out of tolerance. You need to discuss the decision rule and that's going to be applied in that test or calibration that you're going to be undertaking for the customer. Again, any differences will need to be resolved. Customer shall be, these are nothing new here, these requirements here. You have to inform the customer of any deviation, or if the contract needs to be amended after work. Have to cooperate with the customers and their representative, which could include, as long as you maintain the confidentiality, of having them actually come in and watch you folks perform a test or calibration. And still required to maintain records in regards to review of request tenders and contracts. Okay, moving on to section 7.2, selection, verification, and validation of methods. So basically, this section is still intact from 2005. It does, however, it's reorganized to differentiate between when the lab has to verify, which is captured under 7.2.1, and when it and then again when it has to validate, which is captured under 7.2.2. So in general, not many changes to the requirements in themselves. Of course, you still have to use appropriate methods, have to have supporting documents and instructions that need to be kept up to date. You have to ensure you're using the latest valid version of a method. Shall select appropriate methods and inform the customer if the method chosen by the customer is inappropriate. Shall verify that verify that you can properly perform methods before introducing them by ensuring that it can achieve the required performance. And when methods development is required, there shall be a planned activity. So this could be like if you're developing new products or part of a manufacturer where you're coming up with things that may have to come up with how to calibrate it or test it. There's nothing new here on this slide. This is all captured in 2005. Again, deviations shall occur only when it's been documented, testedly justified, authorized. Laboratory shall validate non-standard methods. Laboratory developed methods and standard methods used outside their intended scope, otherwise modified when changes are made to validate methods. A new method validation shall be performed. So that's still intact. One thing with validation is specific. You see the requirement if you're validating a method. The requirement in 2005 is stated there at the bottom for in italicized letters. The requirement in 2017 is you have to maintain records, and these include the procedure, the specification of the requirements, determination of the performance characteristics of the methods. Results obtains a statement of the validity of the method detailing its fitness for the intended use. So a lot more detail there as to what type of records need to be produced if you're validating. Okay, 7.3 is regards to sampling, and this would be sampling that is going to be used for subsequent testing and calibration. And sampling here for, well, for testing and calibration, I think is much more prevalent for testing organizations that this is used. So sampling shall have a sampling plan method when you carry out sampling of substances, material, or products for subsequent testing or calibration. The sampling method shall describe selection of sample sites, the sampling plan, preparation and treatment of samples. So a note there, when received into a laboratory, if there's further handling, so in other words, if you get a sample, then you need to take a sample from that sampling. That would fall under the realm of 7.4, and that is basically implies that sampling is different than subsampling. And we'll see some other requirements here, especially in reporting with samples, pending whether or not the lab is taking the sample or whether you're just testing what the customer brings you. So we'll look at some more requirements here when we get to reporting the results. But if you're sampling, there's some new requirements as far as records. And basically what I have listed here has been added. Date and time of sampling, data to identify and describe the sample, identification of equipment used, transport conditions, deviations, additions to the inclusions from the sampling methods, and the sampling plan. Moving on to 7.4, handling of tester calibration. If you still have to have a procedure, you have to, the laboratory shall have a system for the unambiguous identification of tester calibration. So we added that word unambiguous to the section 7.4 here. So if you have two like items, this picture there, you have to be able to, of course, differentiate between the two. So 7.4.3, that's verbatim right there on the screen. I'm going to go over just the highlights of this. So any deviations from specified conditions shall be recorded. So these are what we're talking about specifically with environmental conditions. Asking the customer for further instructions and record the results of the consultation and exclusion. So basically, if your method specified, for example, you would calibrate it, or test would be done under 20 degrees plus or minus 3 degrees C, and your customer's facility is at 25 C, that's going to force a deviation. Hence, this needs to be discussed with the customer, and if the customer wants you to proceed, it's going to have to be recorded and on your results, as you'll see when we get to that section. So if you need to store or conditions items while they're in the lab prior to testing or calibration, they need to be monitored and recorded. As far as having the facility to do so, that's already been captured in 6.3. So we're not going to, standard does not repeat itself here. Or if they need to be maintained a certain, say, environmental criteria, that then they need to be monitored and recorded. So I'm going to move on to 7.5, and we've always had a section on records. Now records is divided into two different sections here. Recall 2005, records actually within the one section was divided into quality and technical records. Well here, and this is largely because of the option, I'm thinking because of the option A-B, that technical records will need to be looked at by all organizations here, and not so much the quality records if you're happy to comply with 9001. So the big difference here with technical records, still in a nutshell, you still have to maintain enough records to go back and, if need be, perform the specific test or calibration under the same conditions as the original. Again, the new standard 2017 is more up to date with the electronic age. Hence, we don't have that requirement if you need to change a record about specifically prescribing, crossing out, initialing, dated. You still have to be able to track the amendments to previous versions. And if you think about it, it's not required anymore as far as the crossing out, initialing, and dating. However, in order to track what was changed, if you still happen to be using paper records, you can still do that and still meet the requirements. However, that's not required anymore. Okay, everybody's favorite topic is measurement uncertainty in 2017. Has a rather short section devoted to measurement uncertainty. We see the term come up, estimation and evaluation. So the pictures there try to differentiate between the two. This was covered in 2005 under Section 546. So calibration labs is pretty straightforward. Or if you're a testing lab performing your calibration, you had to have a procedure and apply a procedure to estimate measurement uncertainty. Now the laboratory shall identify the contributors to measurement uncertainty. All laboratories performing calibration, including its own equipment, shall evaluate the measurement uncertainty. This is primarily, again, due to the electronic age. This is done more so these days, computer software. Basically, it's walking and not so much walking, but having the user go through and perhaps identify contributors, quantifying the contributors through a spreadsheet other than, say, a documented procedure. However, again, I know I'm repeating myself with this. If you're a lab, you're doing your calibration lab and you're having uncertainties requirements specified, if you have a procedure, that procedure can still be used to as a source to identify the contributors. However, a formal documented procedure is no longer required. Testing labs, the word of estimation pops up more so than calibration. As far as testing is a broad area, as far as what you need to be doing for measurement uncertainty, that's going to be unchanged. A lot of it depends on the method itself. Okay, 7.7, ensure the validity of results. Used to be assured the quality of testing and calibration results, Section 5.9 in 2017. Have some significant changes here. We have 7.7.1, which is specifically for internal controls, 7.7.2, which is for external controls. So 2005 listed some internal checks. There's been additional ones that's been added, which are listed there. But 7.7.2, and this puts another requirement on the labs as far as external controls. And this falls this falls hand in hand. I think I specified this once before with what we already have stated in PL1, which is our policy on proficiency test. The requirement is directly out of the 2017 standard The laboratory shall monitor its performance by comparisons with results of other laboratories. And then it says that I highlighted there, where available and appropriate. This monitor shall be planned, reviewed, but not limited to either or both of the following. So you have to either participate in proficiency testing, that is like through a third-party proficiency testing provider, or participation in an interlaboratory comparison. That would be both yourself and at least another laboratory facilities where you're comparing your results in a meaningful way. And don't want to go into too much here because this is what we already have in place in PL1. If under our proficiency testing requirements, we require you to do interlab or proficiency testing if you want to pursue an intra-lab sort of test. But that where it specifies here, where available and appropriate, we would require you to state, put the request into writing, why interlab or third party, which is the same as proficiency testing, is not feasible, and then also how you plan to conduct the test. So, for example, the calibration program manager, if you're doing temperature, and in order to fulfill PL1 requirements, there's a lot of third-party providers out there. So it's not going to be, it's going to be available and it's going to be appropriate. Hence, basically, this solidifies what we already have in PL1. It's not only PL1 having this requirement, it's actually in standard now, 17025. Okay, section 8 is, 7.8 is reporting the results. So we have a few changes here. The results shall be reviewed and authorized prior to release. The 2005 specified simplified reporting. It used to specify you could do simplified reporting for internal customers and external customers when there was a written agreement in place. That written agreement with external customers is no longer a requirement. So that's a change. A couple things for both testing and calibration. Some additions are the date of issue of the report. So that is actually when the report is generated. So if it happens to be the same day that the calibration or testing was performed, then it needs to be reported as the same date. If the report is generated 2 or 3 days after the test or calibration activities were performed, then that date needs to be recorded. And it has to be a clear indication when results are from external providers, i.e. subcontractors. And this is new, and these are just basically some of the highlights in 7822. And we talked about this during contract review. Again, this is when the customer specifies, say, for example, to proceed with the test or calibration when it's out of limits, or for whatever reason the customer is in agreement, or if you are in agreement to deviate from a procedure at a customer's request, that's what this is covering. So the data provided by the customer shall be clearly identified, and this is on the report. A disclaimer needs to be put on the report when the information is supplied by the customer and can affect the validity of the results. And this is for sampling. So when the sample is provided by the customer, it shall state in the report that the results applied to the samples as received. So in other words, if you're a testing lab and your customers are bringing you in the samples to test, they're sending it in, they're out there providing the sample. It comes into your lab. You're not actually preparing that sample. Then you need to specify as received. So that's an indication is basically you tested what the customer brought you to test. It was a sample as received by your customer. The measurement uncertainty of the results. The 2005 standard specified uncertainty and or a statement of compliance with a metrological specification. That is no longer applicable to 2017. Basically, right now, as you can see, the requirement is you have to report the measurement uncertainty. This is for calibration labs. We always we addressed uncertainty in our PL3, PJLA's policy for measurement uncertainty. And we had some we still do actually still have guidelines for measurement uncertainty being reported and when they need it to be reported. I think this is going to go hand in hand in what's already required for PL3 reporting uncertainty. So basically the standard, the requirement for the standard is you have to have your measurement uncertainty on your calibration certificate. And also uncertainty can come into play for sampling. So sampling is of course going to be for in the realm of 17025 2017 is going to be used for further testing or sampling. So where the laboratory is responsible for the sampling activity, it shall, where necessary for the interpretation of the results, include information to evaluate measurement uncertainty, and that is for the subsequent testing or calibration that's going to be undertaken. Okay, decision rule again, that we specified during contract review if a customer's specifying a statement of compliance with a metrological specification, i.e. pass, fail, intolerance, out of tolerance. The decision rule has to be discussed, documented up front, and it has to be documented on the report. So basically, this is specifying that you have to identify the decision rule on the report. So these are for whenever you're making a statement of conformity. If you're not making a statement of conformity, if you're not stating pass, fail, intolerance, out of tolerance, you're reporting the results, the measurement uncertainty, then there is no decision rule to be considered. However, if you are saying, and it's always been a requirement, that you had to take measurement uncertainty into account. This is just specifying how are you doing it. Okay, complaints. We discussed this earlier at one of our webinars. I believe it was the one in January. Complaints, it's much more detailed in the 2017. It requires a process. If you recall, 2005, basically, it was a one-line item. Basically, you had to have a procedure and you had to maintain records of complaints. So it's much more detailed in 2017. You don't have to have a procedure, but you have to have a documented process. Procedure can be utilized as a documented process. So your procedure, and these are requirements within the standard, should be made your process should be made available to any interested party, and that should be on request with a T at the end. The laboratory shall confirm whether the complaint relates to the lab. If you're part of another larger organization, that these verify the complaint is related to laboratory activities. And the process for handling complaints shall include a description of the process for receiving, validating, investigating the complaint, tracking and recording complaints, and ensuring that any appropriate action is taken. Still with complaints, the laboratory shall acknowledge a receipt of the complaint to the complainant. And this is an interesting one here. The outcomes of the outcomes to be communicated to the complainant shall be made by or reviewed and approved by individuals not involved in the original laboratory activities in question. So if a complaint, let's say, was pertaining to a specific test or calibration, the technician that performs that test or calibration should not be involved in reviewing and approving whatever actions the laboratory takes. There is a note in the standard, I don't have it captured here, that states this can be done by external sources. So I know we have some small laboratories out there where if a complaint comes in, chances are that it may incorporate an individual in the lab, but does give it out for allowing external parties to review and approve any actions that the laboratory takes. And finally, the laboratory shall give formal end of the complaint handlings to the complainant. Okay, 710, non-conforming work. You still have to have a procedure. Don't have any detail to go over here because basically everything's intact from 2005 to 2017. 711, that's a whole new section in 2017. This is data and information management, which was addressed in various sections in 2005. Control of records, computer systems, calculations and transfers. It has its own section now. And this is primarily, just thinking back to 2005 to today, we've transitioned to more of a laboratory information management system, electronic, a lot less paper. So this was brought into 2017. A lot of the elements were captured in 2005. Some of the things here that is additional is the laboratory information shall include recording system failures and the appropriate immediate and corrective action. So this would address something like a total system crash. And quite often these things are maintained off-site. So when a laboratory information management system is managed and maintained off-site or through an external provider, the laboratory shall ensure that the provider or operator of the system complies with all applicable requirements in this document. Okay, section 8.1. This is where we get into A and B. So I sort of explained what the A and B was at the front part of this presentation. So basically, if you're not 9001, you're not recognized by a recognized registrar. It's got as an assessment body, we're going to assess these sections to the fullest. If you are recognized, and let's say you can produce to the say a current certificate of registration as objective evidence, not saying that the AB accrediting bodies won't be looking at these. The extent as to how they're going to be assessed will be up to the right now. It's up to the individual accrediting bodies. It's something that in the U.S. here I can sort of ask for, that the accrediting bodies are looking for a little bit of guidance from APLAC, which is the region of ILAC, which we fall under the U.S. I would say if you are a 9001 if you're a 9001 register, as far as doing your internal audit, if you should know your system better than to say a external person, say from an accrediting body coming on board, and you know that your system is incorporating those elements of 9001 into your testing and calibration laboratories, then I would say you could do your internal audit in these sections as an option B. So we're going to look at the requirements for section 8 here. And it does specify option A throughout section 8. So laboratory management shall provide evidence of the commitment to development and implementation of the management system to continually improve its effectiveness. That's verbatim, section 423 out of 2005, except basically top laboratory management is referred here as opposed to top management here. All all documents, processes, systems, records related to the fulfillment of this requirements of this document shall be included or referenced from or linked to the management system. So here I want to specify that there's no longer a requirement for a quality manual, but you can still use a quality manual. There's basically, if you look at what's required there under that bulleted item, if you're using a quality manual and in your manual you have that, say, that pyramid with a quality manual as a top tier document, then you have like maybe internal procedures, technical procedures, forms, policies, things like that underneath of it. If you think about that, that will still comply with the requirements stated here. However, it's not required to have a quality manual. If you have a quality manual, there is no requirement that it needs to be aligned to the new standard. That'll be up to you if you want to continue using the quality manual and you want to revise it to, say, correspond to the new sections of the standard and to strengthen requirements for the that's stated on that bulleted item. By all means, you can do that. Might make it easier for you when you're doing your internal audits, but it is not required. Okay, A3, control of management system documents, i.e. it's old section 4.3, document control. So again, changes to this section is more based on the information management LIMS systems that folks are seem to be adhering to these days. You don't see any reference to handwritten amendments. There's no requirement for a master list. Recall in 2005 that there was specific requirements regarding a master list. The laboratory shall control the documents, internal, external, that relates to the fulfillment of this document. So the master list, if you're using a master list to fulfill that requirement, you can still utilize the management, the master list, and as a vehicle for controlling. However, the master list is not required, but it can still be used to fulfill this requirement. Okay, control of records. Again, these are more quality-related records, corrective action records, management review records, internal audit records. We had technical records previously, so we have two different sections capturing records. So that's the basis of what's in 2017. You have to implement the controls needed. There's no requirement for a formal procedure. However, a procedure can be used to implement the controls needed, but it is not required. So it's giving you much more flexibility here. However, if it's not, the old adage, if it's not broke, why fix it? If the procedure is still working for you, the procedure can still be used to comply with a lot of these requirements that we're going over that no longer has a procedure as a requirement, but you still have to ensure certain things are being met. Okay, 8.5 is that risk-based thinking has been added. So this is new. This is falling hand in hand with 9001 and the other 170 standards that series that are out there. So 17025 is following suit. So there's a new chapter on risk-based thinking. The employment of this information has enabled some reduction of the standards prescriptive guidelines and resulted in their replacement by performance-based guidelines. So these are some of the ideologies behind this section being put into to not just 17025, but other standards in front of it. Addressing both risk and opportunities, establish a basis for increasing the effectiveness of the management system, Achieving improved results and preventing negative effects. The laboratory is responsible for deciding which risks and opportunities need to be addressed. The laboratory is responsible for deciding which. The accrediting body, however, assesses whether the laboratory has established appropriate actions for dealing with risk and opportunities in accredited laboratories. So that's some of the ideologies behind this being added. I'm going to look at the requirements here. The laboratory shall consider risk and opportunities associated with laboratory activities in order to give assurance that the management system achieves its intended results, enhance opportunities to achieve the purpose and objectives of the laboratory, prevent or reduce undesirable impact and potential failures in the laboratory activities, achieve improvement. The laboratory shall plan actions to address risk and opportunities and how to implement the actions into the management system, evaluate the effectiveness of these actions. So there's a note there, and it basically, if you let you read through that note, but it's basically stating there's no formal method that the standard is dictating that a laboratory has to prescribe to. It's up to the laboratory to determine how they want to, basically something that you may be doing but just not documenting it and creating records on how you're handling the requirements for risk management here. Risk management, I basically just wanted to go over. It's here, go over what the requirements are. It's a completely new addition. It was mentioned in 17025, but not to the extent in 2017. We're going to drill down a little bit deeper with risk management on a webinar, which is coming down the road in the not too distant future. So try to give a little more, hopefully some guidance in that area. Right now, just basically looking at the differences between the two standards, and that's a whole new chapter just been added. So moving on, we have improvement. So basically, the laboratory shall identify and select opportunities, and customers' feedback still needs to be pursued by the lab. No difference there. Another item that you don't see anymore is preventive action. That does not occur in the 2017 standard. Preventive action is being proactive, as our friend Marty Fife there says, nip it in the bud. So that's going to come under 8.6 under the section of improvement, but you don't see that term in 2017, i.e. preventive action. Corrective action is pretty much still intact from 2005. Root cause has been documented as to determine the causes of the nonconformity. There could be more than one root cause. Again, you still need to maintain, the records must be maintained, and a procedure can still be used to ensure the requirements are being met. So there's specific requirements. They're closely aligned to the requirements in 2005. Nothing really different there. Internal audits. Again, like I specified, was specific in 2005 about competencies and impartiality. That's already covered under the section in personnel. So what's required in 2017, the laboratory shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals. 2005 stated a predetermined scheduled. Okay, management review. So internal audits, and I like to specify this when I do assessments. Internal audits, you're looking for compliance. You're looking for compliance to your system. You're looking for compliance to 17025. Management review, and is you're looking for opportunities for improvement. So Ideally, you want some output. You want some things coming out of your management review. And the standard's been revised to sort of force your hand on this somewhat. Um, uh, so you got two different sections on here. You have inputs and outputs. So if you recall, in 2005, your management review had to take into account things like internal audits, audits by external bodies, corrective action, customer feedback. They're all still there. However, you're also going to have to look at, and this is going back to risk, it's going to be something that has to be accounted for in the management review. So there are inputs, so you go back and you sort of look at what's been done. However, what I like about the standard, and I say ideally the management review, you're looking for opportunities for improvement. You have to have some outputs. So some outputs, and these are requirements, and they're listed right there, A, B, C, D. The effectiveness of the management system and its process, improvement of laboratory activities related to the fulfillment of this requirements, provisions of required resources, and any need for change. Okay. Reached the end of the standard. That was though I've gone over this time. I thought I might, because I went over every section. I just wanted, there's two annexes in 2017, Annex A. They're both informative. That's metrological traceability, and Annex B, as far as that option A and B, it gives a little bit more guidance into informative information as far as what the standard is speaking of and what it's referring to option A and B. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause here. 5 minutes, and try to hold your questions too. And like I said, we're going to go into specifics about the requirements. This topic was just basically we're looking at the differences. So as far as interpretations of the new requirements, things like that, as far as how do you comply with, they're probably going to be addressed a little bit more sort of like we did in January with complaints. We drill down a lot in the each specific areas. So I'll open up. I'll be quiet here for 5 minutes. If you have a question, submit it. They'll be funneled into myself here after 5 minutes, and I'll go through and answer as many as I can. So I'll give you all an opportunity right now to ask questions. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Got some very good questions here. Before I proceed with the questions, just want to go ahead and make the announcements for next month's webinar, which will be on Tuesday, April 24th, assuring the validity of results and a look at 7.6 evaluation of measurement uncertainty. So we sort of basically we touched on them today, but we'll drill down deeper in April on these specific items, and there was some significant differences there between the two standards in 7.7 and 7.6 is a new section that's been added, but it's been incorporated in 2005, measurement uncertainty. Okay. Question 1, do you have a sense of how frequently ongoing means when identifying risk to impartiality? There is no stock answer to that, and I've looked at this before. I've been asked or I've seen it documented. It really depends on the organization. If you're a small organization, a few people, not a whole lot of things, personnel is pretty stable, I would say at a minimum, when you bring new clients aboard, that may be a time you would want to look at. At a minimum, I would say it should be addressed during the management review. I did an assessment a couple of weeks ago, a very large company, offices throughout the U.S. and around the world. In that case, a lot of changes are going on. Personnel are moving, a lot of different clients. It may need to be more ongoing. So I would just say state at a minimum for smaller organizations when new clients come on board. And that's just my thought on it. And at a minimum during the management review. Will PJLA have a separate set of policies applied to 2005 versus 2017 to 2005? We're going to change our policy, guys, to comply with 2017. There's not going to be a whole lot of changes, just thinking about it, because what we already have in place falls hand in hand with these requirements. Think about, PL1. We already specify you have to do interlab or third-party IEPT. Unless it's not appropriate to do so, then you have to tell us. PL2, measurement traceability, already, if you look at the annex of 17025 2017, it goes hand in hand to what we already have in place. So I don't foresee any changes in those two. With PL3, uncertainty, the only thing if we're going to revise something there may have to do with the new requirement concerning the decision rule. It's a requirement in the standard. It's a shall, so it has to be done. So that may be an area that we revise. PL4, scopes of accreditation, no, I don't see any change in that. And of course, it's not going to affect the symbol. 2005 is going to be, it's not going to be recognized by ILAC after 2020. Just FYI, nobody's asked this, but it's a 3-year transition period. You can stay accredited to 2005 for PJLA August 31st, 2020, because it's going to be obsolete after, I believe, November 29th, 2020, and that's mandated by ILAC. So the little buffer there is in case there perhaps might be some non-conformance or things that close like package. During this year, during your scheduling, if you're accredited with PJLA, we'll ask you if you want to stay with 2005, 2017. So you can still stay with 2005 up till 2020. If we keep a formal job description procedure, does it have to remain a controlled document? Yes, it does. If it's used in your quality management system, then it would come under the realm of document control, and it will need to be controlled. So if there's objective evidence that's being used and it's not being controlled, then you're not complying with document control. It's not required to have a job description anymore, but if you use it, you can still use it to communicate to your personnel their duties and responsibilities. And if you're using it, you need to control it. Will the new standard require that we also achieve 9001 as well? The answer to that clearly no. There's no requirement whatsoever. Actually, and it's in the prefix, and it's both standards. If you meet the requirements of 17025, you're going to fulfill the requirements in 9001. I do assessments for the 17025. I also do audits for 9001. I can vouch for that. But there is no requirement that you formally have to get a 9001 certification and a 17025 accreditation. The only difference would be if you happen to be 9001, you'll fall under that option B category. Okay, let me go to my second set here. I came in about 10 minutes late. Sorry. Will a copy of these slides or recording be posted? Yes, up on our website under training webinars. There's a recording. There's a section for recorded webinars. They go back several years. I went over this at the first part, so you must have missed that part. Hopefully this one will be recorded. It is being recorded and we post it shortly after we sign off here today. For facilities and environment, excuse me, lost my light on my phone there. Can the must be periodically reviewed requirement be accomplished through routine SOP reviews? I would say yes. If your environment hasn't changed and your procedures are still intact, just a simple review of the SOP and assuring that your facility and environment complies to what you have documented. If things change, let's say you add an addition, things like you still have to control access, to your calibration and testing. That might need to be reviewed. If nothing changes, a simple review of the SOP, I would say, would be sufficient. Does the internal auditor need to be certified by PJALA or the like? Well, there is no basically the requirement is it comes, and I mentioned this during the presentation, is internal auditor is laboratory personnel. Person has to be determined to be competent. So you may have to set your own. The standards is more prescriptive, so you may have to set your own guidelines as what you would consider as a competent internal auditor, but there is no requirement to be certified by any sort of organization. Something that is basically the 2005 says, but internal auditor has to be trained and whenever possible, independent of the activity being audited. That part will come under impartiality, which has been addressed. It always specified training, but it never did specify the level of training. As an assessor, if I do an assessment and you did an internal audit, and I'm finding a lot of things that should have been caught during the internal audit, then I may question that competency of the internal auditor. I like to see a lot of documentation with objective evidence that were looked at, not just check marks on an internal audit. But as far as any formal certification, and no, there is no requirement. But maybe ask how do you determine the competency of your internal auditor? In referencing to monitoring personnel competence, would in-process testing satisfy that? Yes, that would be one way. Proficiency testing, you have to do proficiency testing. I would say if you incorporate your personnel, the more the merrier in your proficiency testing. That could be another good method of monitoring your performance. Basically checking their work, but create a record for it that this is being done. This next one is a very open-ended question. How do you define risk? I can Google it and come up with a definition. A risk is sort of, to me, it's like a threat. It's when you have desired outputs and there's some sort of threat that you need to evaluate as to the acceptance of a potential risk. Can it be accepted? Can it be mitigated to an acceptable level? To risk, I mean, just a broad definition, and your guess could be as good as mine as far as a definition. But a risk, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is a threat, something that's going to adversely affect the desired result. You have an opportunity. You have to, look at your risk associated with an opportunity. Okay, actually, got some good questions here. We just got another one here at the last minute. How many documentation procedures do you see as being required? And will there be a difference in numbers of procedures between testing and calibration lab? I haven't counted procedure requirement for procedures are significantly less as far as having a document procedure. Mentions a few times. I recall going through the presentation here. It's a lot less than in the 2005 version, primarily because things are being interfaced and done more in the electronic age and computers and softwares these days in a formal procedure. And I can't think of an instance where a procedure is required for a calibration and not required for a testing organization. Regarding calibration, you inform us that we can also follow 6 elements of traceability. Can you provide us more detail? Well, I can't really go into all that, but I can direct you to do exactly where they're located. PL2, PJLA's policy on measurement traceability, which is available on our website under resources. We go into those 6 elements and what's incorporated in those 6 elements. I can tell you, if I'm looking at a non-accredited source to be approved, some of the key elements are looking at the standard that was used to calibrate your standard. Uncertainty. The source has to have a document. By definition, traceability incorporates uncertainty. And they have to have an internal measurement assurance program, i.e. they have to participate in something like proficiency testing, control charts, something like that on an ongoing basis. But yes, PL2 will basically go over a form that we require. It's called an LF123, and we'll go over those 6 elements of traceability. I, as calibration program manager, a lot of those requests are funneled to me for approval, and I can give you firsthand. They're the 3 things that I would always be looking for as objective evidence of traceability. This next one, I'm not really sure of the answer. Clarify deviation versus variance. The latter term used in my industry, where deviation was modifying the procedure steps. Right. Deviation is if you have a procedure, you wrote your and you're deviating from it, basically. A variance was an agreed upon acceptance of a result. So I guess I'll take a stab at this one. I'm a calibration person. May be more prevalent for testing. I would say if it's an agreement involved on the deviation, if it's with the customer and you're deviating from a procedure, it needs to be agreed to. If your customer is telling you to deviate from the procedure, you need to determine whether or not that's acceptable, and then you need to record it on the tester calibration report. But I really can't answer. A variance was an agreed upon acceptance of a result. So I hate to leave you hanging there, but I really can't make a correlation with that question. I apologize. when we do an interlab comparison in the earlier something, there was no mention of how many labs we should engage. In the 2017, it mentioned 2 or more labs. Is it possible to attain Z-score with 2 labs? And it give a correct picture of the capabilities of the lab. I would say that you probably couldn't do a Z-score with just 2 laboratories. You need to establish a reference value somewhere. I would say if you're doing just a 2 labs, I would say if you're doing an interlab, bare bones minimum is 2 labs. The more, the merrier. Problem with just 2 labs, if the results don't agree with each other, then where does the issue lie? If it's 2 labs, bare bones minimum, and we do have on our website an eNormal analysis that can be conducted, where you're looking at the value, the degree of uncertainty of both labs, and basically seeing if they intersect each other. Okay, I've gone way over. It's 2:39 Eastern. I'm here in the state of Virginia, and that is looks like the last question. I knew there'd be a lot of interest in this topic. Again, it's available on will be available on our website. I hope you found it beneficial. I covered quite a bit of material over a relatively short time. So, like I said, I went through the whole entire standard. So, April 24th, mark your calendar. And actually, we have posted on our website through June is the upcoming schedule of the webinars. We'll refresh that and come up with a second half. But again, thank you all for signing in. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed putting this together, and I sincerely hope you found this information beneficial and can take forth, especially those of you all that are transitioning from 2005, 2017, and you'll have to do it by 2020, that you found this information beneficial. So I would suggest that if you are making that transition, to acquire the copy of the standard, which is available at the ISO website, and do your internal audit. Once you believe you've made the applicable changes and incorporated the new requirements into your quality management system, we do have on our website, if any of you have been assessed from us, you're familiar with maybe, and I've seen a lot of organizations utilize our LF56 checklist into their internal audit program, which that's what I use when I'm doing an assessment for PJ. That's my working document. We actually have on our website now, and we are assessing labs effective February 1st. We are assessing to the new standard. That new working document, that is available on our website, the 2017 working document. So basically, it's going through the standard, going through PL 1, 2, 3, 4, SOP 3 for procedures, asking the prevalent questions that's being asked within the standard. So that could be a useful tool for you that's available on our website. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Again, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.